Okay, well, why don't we get started? This is Marvin Swartz from Duke Department of Psychiatry and the Wilson Center for Science and Law. And we're very pleased to have a special panel presentation today featuring one of our great board members for the Wilson Center, Judge Steve Leifman. So the title of the panel discussion is Ending Criminalization of Mental Illness. And as you know, many of you will be aware of the work of Judge Leifman, who's for over a decade as the Associate Administrative Judge in the Miami-Dade County Court 11th Judicial Circuit of Florida, has worked with stakeholders to reform how the criminal legal system interacts with individuals with mental illness. With his colleagues, he's developed a unique diversion model, the Miami model, that is a model for reducing violence, unnecessary arrests, and inappropriate incarceration among persons with mental illness. The model encourages recovery, reduces stigma, and gives hope to individuals with mental illness. On our panel today is Judge Leifman, whom I'll introduce in a moment, and Justin Volpe. Unfortunately, Cindy Schwartz, who's the program manager, is not available due to illness. But just to say a little bit about Judge Leifman, I could say a lot. He's served as special advisor on criminal justice and mental health for the Supreme Court of Florida since 2007, in addition to his day job in the court. He's known for efforts to keep mentally ill individuals out of prisons and jails. He was the chair of the Court Mental Health Subcommittee for 3 years in Florida from 2007 to 10. And in 2000, he started the 11th Judicial Circuit Criminal Mental Health Project, which aims to divert people with mental illness who might otherwise end up in the criminal justice system. Judge Leifman's received many honors related to his work. He received the Brain and Behavior Research Foundation's Productive Lives Award. In 2015, he became the first Floridian judge to receive the Rehnquist Award for Judicial Excellence from Chief Justice John Roberts. And he has been, since 2014, a member of the board of the American Psychiatric Foundation. His co-presenter is Justin Volpe, who's a certified recovery peer specialist for the program with the Miami-Dade 11th Judicial Criminal Mental Health Project Jail Division program. And he's helped over 1,000 people with mental illness get out of jail and into treatment, and helped train over 2,500 law enforcement officers. So the format we'll follow here is Judge Leifman and Mr. Volpe will talk about their program. If you have questions or comments, please put them in the chat feature, and we'll get to them in the course of the discussion. But without any further ado, let me hand it over to Judge Leifman and Mr. Volpe.
Thank you, Dr. Schwartz, so much, and thank you for letting us talk about this project, because we think it's incredibly important. Just by way of introduction and background, what you realize after several years on the bench is that in many ways, the criminal justice system is the repository for many failed public policies. And there is no greater failed public policy that I believe than our treatment towards people with serious mental illnesses. The fact that we have applied a criminal justice model to an illness, to me, explains why we have failed so miserably here. I got involved in this issue in 2000 due to a case I had. It was pretty traumatic for me, and it really was a window to everything that was wrong with our mental health criminal justice system. I was getting ready to go into court one morning. I was approached by the assistant state attorney and the assistant public defender, and they asked me if I would speak to a couple whose son was in jail on a case I was about to hear. I was handling what we call a misdemeanor jail division. So these are people in custody on low-level offenses. And there are basically three kinds of people in this division. There are those with attached felonies who are not allowed out of custody. There are those that are too poor and they cannot afford to bond out of custody. But mostly it was people with serious mental illnesses that just didn't know how to get out of custody. And so this couple came in, they were lovely people, clearly pretty well off and sophisticated, and just terribly distraught. They started to tell me about their son. He was brilliant. He had gone to Harvard. He had a late onset of schizophrenia, and he was homeless and cycling through the criminal justice system, and they just didn't know what to do. I was pretty new at the time. This was in 2000. And I just assumed we must have some kind of system in place for people who had a serious mental illness that got arrested, because I knew we had a system in place for people that had heart attacks that got arrested, and I assumed we must have the same. So I made one of those rookie mistakes, and I promised them that I would get their son help. And they were pretty distraught. The mom was crying and the dad was shaking, and they literally were begging me to get him help. So as I started to go back into the court, mom stopped me and she said, "Judge, there's one more thing I need to tell you about my son." She said, "Not only is he brilliant, but respectfully, he probably knows more about the mental health system than you do." I looked at her. I wasn't clear what she was trying to say to me. And I'm like, "Excuse me?" She said, "Oh, you see, my son is the former head of psychiatry at Jackson Memorial Hospital. He was a Harvard-educated psychiatrist who had a late onset of schizophrenia, didn't show up to work one day, apparently cashed in his life insurance policy, and jumped on a plane to go to Israel because he needed to be closer to God. And within a few weeks, the Israelis deported him back to Miami. He was running around naked in the Orthodox section of Jerusalem. And for his own safety, they sent him back to Miami, where he became homeless and just started getting arrested." And so when I went into court and I called his case, we had an amazing conversation. He was coherent, he was thoughtful. He knew what was going on until I asked him some questions about his illness. And because I had not been trained and had no idea what I was doing, I inadvertently triggered a full-blown psychotic episode. And he started screaming at the top of his lungs that his real parents had died in the Holocaust, and the people in court were from the CIA and they had come to kill him. And the only thing I had been taught was that if someone acted strange or bizarre was to order a psychological evaluation, which I immediately did. So he ended up spending 10 to 12 weeks in jail on possession of a dairy cart, which is a crime in Miami-Dade. And I ordered all these expensive evaluations to determine his competency. All three evaluations found that he was incompetent and that he met criteria for Florida's involuntary commitment law because he was imminently dangerous to self or others. And when I went to try to get him hospitalized, I learned the hard way from a case that the lawyers handed me that I had no jurisdiction to do anything but release him back to the street. And we were just doing this every single day. And it was one of those situations where I just didn't want to continue. And I think one of the best things about being a judge is that when we invite people to meetings, they come. And fortuitously, the first national meeting on this issue was in Miami through the Gaines Center. And we were able to get Hank Stedman to send us a team of people to do a summit. And we met for 2 days and we mapped out this entire process. And we looked at the intersection between criminal justice and mental health and found that, frankly, we were embarrassingly dysfunctional. And we put together this amazing collaborative agreement, a written agreement where I had all the parties sign it. And we started to make a structural change on how we were going to approach this issue. And what I want to do now is, let Justin talk to you a little bit about how he got involved in the process and what he does. And I will tell you, unfortunately, he just got a major promotion and got hired by a national organization. So we were lucky that he was willing to do this with us today. But he has made a huge difference, and our peers really play one of the most important roles. We joke, but the truth is they are the secret sauce of our recipe that helps us get people into recovery. So Justin, when I turn it over to you, and then we'll talk more about some of the details of how the program works.
Sounds good. Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Marvin. Appreciate the introduction. I want to tell you before I get into the nuts and bolts of how I became involved with the program that my current role, which I just started in the beginning of the year, is a peer specialist for NASPED, or the National Association of State Mental Health Program Directors. And I'm also the president of the board of directors of the Miami Recovery Project, which is a nonprofit peer-run organization in Miami, Florida. But for 14 years plus, I have been involved and continue to be involved with Judge Leifman and the Miami-Dade Jail Diversion Program. I grew up originally in New Jersey, a childhood of trauma, addiction, and, you know, uneasiness, and things just weren't going right. I packed my bags and I left to Miami when I was 19 years old, and things got much worse. I had a history of serious mental illness in my family. I had a substance abuse problem. I had a lot of unstable living, apartment hopping. I went through a couple dozen different jobs, always unstable. Didn't know that I needed to get the help myself. But when you're in the situation, it's easier to see from an outside perspective than when you're in it, and to listen to advice. And unfortunately, I had to go through the system myself to get where I am today. And I was hospitalized. I was sent to drug rehabilitations. And eventually I ended up incarcerated in April of 2007, which is going to be 15 years ago, in the Miami-Dade County Jail on the dubbed forgotten floor, the 9th floor of the old county jail, which was a horrific place, needless to say. I didn't come from wealth, but I did live a decent life, and I had a hard time believing I was still in this country when I was incarcerated. I was hearing voices, I was seeing things, I was completely symptomatic. I was 130, 140 pounds soaking wet, and I'm 6'1". They were handing me fistfuls of medications through the door that I didn't know what was what. I knew that around me was not a good place, that jail was not helping me feel better. There was people being beat down. There were screams all the time, and you didn't know what was going to happen next. I was in jail for 6 weeks, and what I didn't know was my family, they got in contact with Judge Leifman's program, and I got sent to a hospital, and I got changed my medication, and I got approached by a staff member to go into treatment. I went into treatment. I went up and down in treatment that summer, but I found my way, and I graduated, and I closed out my court case a day before my 24th birthday. And I was ready to go celebrate, because that's what people do when they close out their court case. You can actually see them take a bus from the courthouse to Miami Beach. It's about a 30-minute ride. And they offered me a job, and it changed my life. And I went from having an open felony to becoming a peer specialist within 8 months. And I was immediately submersed in the community, doing service, helping people that in a situation that I was still experiencing and had just got done through. And this job matured me as a person. It humbled me day in and day out, working in the community, getting people out of jail with serious mental health issues and co-occurring issues, getting them into treatment, visiting them at their homes, at their ALFs, at their treatment programs, bringing them medication, bringing them food, navigating all the pieces in the community that, you know, don't come that easy, that in a system that doesn't make sense. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. But before I pass it back to you, Judge Leifman, I just want to let you know that the shell of the person I was 15 years ago because of this program. I sit to you in a beautiful home in Miami, Florida. Wife of 14 years, 2 beautiful children, and 2 cars. I just don't have that 2-car garage yet. You got to be a judge to get that in Miami. The carports are something else, but I'm really thankful for this, and I'd love to explain a little more, but I don't want to talk too much. So why don't we talk about the ins and outs of the programs a little bit, Judge?
Thanks, Justin. Steve, you're on mute.
Thank you, sorry. I think a lot of people don't appreciate is that, you know, I call us civilians, people that don't really have mental health issues or family members, and pretty naive about it. And they think, oh, if the person just takes their medication, everything's going to be fine. And it's just not the reality, because by the time you get arrested with a serious mental illness, the system's beating the crap out of you pretty bad. And for a lot of people, they've given up. And it's not that they don't want or care about getting better or taking medication. Many of them don't care if they breathe that day. They have clinical depression on top of their serious mental illness. It's hard out there, particularly if you're homeless, you have substance use disorder, people treat you terribly, you're in and out of the jail, which treats you terribly. And so what Justin has been able to do and the other peers is they help reestablish relationships with people. And they begin to incentivize them to want to get better. And that's almost the first step necessary to help people to help themselves. And without that step, it doesn't really work that well. So just by way of a little bit of background, in the United States, 70% of people in jail, 70%, either have a serious mental illness, a substance use disorder, or both. We often joke that maybe what we should do is have specialty courts for the 30% and have a therapeutic jurisprudence system for the 70%, so that we could actually do a much better job helping people get into recovery. The United States spends over $1 trillion a year in direct and indirect dollars related to that 70% of the population. Before the pandemic, 1 out of 115 adults were behind bars. 1 out of 38 adults were under correctional supervision. Since 1980, the number of people going to jail in the United States has gone up by 500%, and their sentences have gone up by 166%. And most of this is really due to untreated mental illness and substance use disorders. In fact, people in the United States with a serious mental illness are 10 times more likely to be incarcerated than hospitalized. They're 19 times more likely to find a bed in the criminal justice system than in any state hospital. Annually, we have about 1.7 million people with serious mental illnesses arrested. And on any given day, there's about 380,000 people with serious mental illnesses behind bars and another 574,000 under correctional supervision. And aside from the enormous human cost and toll that this takes on people with these illnesses, it's outrageously expensive. Miami-Dade County, for instance, spends $636,000 a day. That's $232 million a year to warehouse 2,400 people in its jail with serious mental illnesses out of about 4,300. Comparatively, the good state of Florida spends $47.3 million for mental health and substance use treatment for the entire county of Miami-Dade and Monroe County. I mean, our system is absolutely backwards. In fact, most of the money that we spend on mental illness in this country is spent in institutional settings, either hospitalization, jails, prisons, or competency restoration. Most states, in fact, spend more money to incarcerate people with a mental illness than to treat them. And our system is just outrageously backwards. And what we don't talk about enough is the comorbidity issues. People with mental illnesses have higher rates of cancer. They have higher rates of heart disease. They're more likely to get admitted to a hospital when they go. They're more likely to stay longer than someone without a mental illness, and they are more likely not to have insurance. And those costs are probably 10 to 20 times higher than what we're even spending on the criminal justice side. And so we've really done a terrible job approaching this issue. And the same people that end up in jail end up at our hospitals, end up at our crisis units, they end up on the street, and they just bounce from one terrible system to the next. So what we did after I had this case is we had this summit where I mentioned we brought everybody together, and using the sequential intercept model, which had just been rolled out. We had Patty Griffin, who was one of the co-authors, as one of our summit experts. And we mapped out this intersection. And what we realized is that we were embarrassingly dysfunctional, that, I remember asking ourselves who was more sick, us supposedly healthy people that had designed a system that was designed to fail, and it failed perfectly, by the way, or these poor souls who just had serious illnesses that nobody was helping access into treatment. And so we created this two-part approach. And this is not a mental health court. That's kind of the smallest thing that we do. The data on mental health courts is actually pretty mixed. They're usually too small. They only take about 1/10 of 1% of people that need it. And they usually take the wrong 1/10 of 1% that need it, because the politics of it, I mean in a small p, not in a pejorative way, prosecutors are just finally starting to learn these issues, and they tend to want to take the people that are low risk. And the data shows us that those people shouldn't be in a mental health court at all anyway, that they're more likely to spend more time in jail because they're going to miss an appointment, and they're more likely to hang out with some real bad characters and learn really bad habits. And so the low risk people you don't want in these programs, you want moderate to high risk people, and no one does it that way. So what we did is we approached this as a diversion system, and we looked around the country, and to us, the Memphis model for crisis intervention team policing was the best pre-arrest model. For those of you that don't know it, although at this point, probably most of you do, it's a 40-hour training program that teaches law enforcement how to de-escalate a situation, where to take someone as opposed to arresting them, and how to get a better outcome. We also created a post-arrest diversion system where we do both misdemeanors and felony cases. So if you get arrested on a misdemeanor and you meet criteria, say for our involuntary commitment, we get you out of jail within 3 days. We have to, even before COVID, we would make sure you didn't have a communicable illness, but now we have to make sure you don't have COVID either. And we send you to a crisis stabilization unit. And because they're on a criminal hold, the 72 hours of our civil commitment law doesn't apply. And so we actually set the case for about 2 weeks, which what we find is most people actually need that amount of time to start to stabilize and begin recovery. Particularly, it's a much better environment than in jail. And, I can tell you just from going up on that old floor, and Justin can tell you, nobody gets better up there, you get worse. And so we do similar programs with our felony population, and it's been incredibly successful. Just to give you an idea, we keep data, or kept data for the last 10 years from we have 36 police departments trained. That's all 36 out of 36. But we keep data on the two largest, the city of Miami and Miami-Dade. And over the last 10 years, those two agencies alone did over 105,000 mental health calls, just two agencies. And out of those 105,000 plus cases, they only made 198 arrests over 10 years. The number of arrests in Dade County plummeted from about 118,000 a year to about 53,000 before COVID. Our jail audit went from about 7,300 to 4,300. We closed one of our 3 main jails at an actual savings of $12 million a year. It's been closed 8 years now. That's $96 million in real dollar savings, not cost shifting. And it saved the county, just that one program, 300 years of jail bed days. The recidivism rate among our misdemeanor population fell from about 75% to about 20%. And our felony recidivism rate fell from about 75 to 25%. And the felony program alone saved the county another 84 years of jail bed days. And so it really has changed the way the county looks at this, because they've saved so much money. It's given us a lot of buy-in and a lot of commitment of resources from them. And I'll talk to you a little bit about our next big phase of this, but maybe Justin, you can talk a little bit about how Justin was working on the felony side, and he was attached to the felony team. We had 2 teams, a misdemeanor and felony team. And Justin, why don't you talk a little bit about the mechanics, how you would get a case and then what you would do first and how you would work it up. And if you can, maybe talk a little bit about the assessments that were done. And if not, I can talk about that.
All right. Well, first of all, I worked for both teams, and the clients that I dealt with mostly were the highest risk, highest need clients, because I've been doing this the longest, and I have a way through peer support to build good rapport with participants in the program. And before I talk so much about the nuts and bolts, I want to advocate that peer support is a crucial part to the recovery process for treatment centers, for any kind of program. Peer support doesn't have to be just for people with criminal justice issues or mental health issues. There's peer support veterans, youth, family, LGBTQT. There's peer support. Here we are, Duke University. Is a doctor going to listen to another doctor? That's peer support, you know? But the peer support role is really important with this program because it's keeping people out of jail and out of the hospital. And I truly believe that regardless of a lot of bureaucratic red tape with whatever job you have, that it's a better quality of life and a better opportunity for somebody and giving them a chance at recovery. But before a client is even assigned to a peer specialist, there's a whole team involved. And to go over it briefly, there's a team lead on the misdemeanor and felony team. There's 2 court specialists or 3 court specialists that manage their court cases and make coordinations. And then there's a peer specialist. There's right now, I think 5 or 6 peer specialists, but we have 8 total spots that work in the community primarily with those clients. And those clients are assigned by not only risk and need, but who fits with who. If somebody doesn't like me or didn't like me, I wouldn't stay with them. It's not going to work like that. Peer support doesn't, if somebody experienced serious trauma around a male, we wouldn't give them a male peer specialist. And a lot of other cultural exceptions that whatever works, works. But before the client is accepted into our program is in the criminal, you know, by the lawyers, by the state attorney, they're assessed. And somebody is given an assessment to see what their needs and risks are. We use the Ohio risk assessment. And what else? Cut in for a second, Steve, is the
Texas Christian University drug screen, and we do a psychosocial.
Yes, yes. So before the person gets out of jail, a team of experts is saying what the best shot for this person is. If they need housing, if they need a treatment program, if they need little support at all, and they can do it themselves. And we try to abide by those guidelines the best we can. And once those guidelines are set down, the participant has to agree. Even though we have a post-track probation program in the felony, there are a lot of pretrial cases where this is a voluntary program. If you do not want treatment, we are not going to force it to you. And that is peer support. Peer support is voluntary too. You can't force somebody to recover. You can't force somebody to take the medication. But as a peer support specialist, I can show you walk the walk that I've been through it. But I don't come out, like Steve said, and say, well, my name's Justin, I take medication and I think you should too. And this program worked for me. And it's about developing relationships and you know, really feeling somebody out and listening and being a good listener. And this job has taught me ultimate patience and how to do that and what the needs are of our participants and what they want, because sometimes they don't align with what the court wants. But like I said before, despite that, I believe it brings a better quality of life. Once the participant is released from jail and taken to the next level in the community, whether it be independent housing, a recovery home, or a treatment center, the peer specialist is getting their property from the jail, because when they're arrested, they don't have anything. They're picking up their medications and they're meeting them at their place of living, and they're bringing them a fresh pair of clothes and their property and whatever they have. And let me tell you something, people are usually very happy to get a cup of coffee and a fresh pair of clothes and to talk to somebody about what they just went through. It's that initial contact that helps build that relationship and sets it all up and builds credibility in the system. And being a peer support is not all easy, and you have to report some things and not report some things, and know how to build a relationship for people that do not trust the system. The other thing is that people watch this and see us talk and they say, we can do this and people can recover. Well, you're taking somebody that has been a history of substance abuse and trauma for maybe 20, 30, 40 years, and expect them to give them a medication and they're gonna, do a complete 180. It doesn't work like that. The system doesn't work like that, or we wouldn't be in this position in the first place. And it takes a lot of people in the community, not just the criminal justice system, but the whole community, to really support this issue and to make it feel like it's accepting and welcoming that you can recover and it's okay to deal and cope with some of these things. So I think I went off track a little bit, but the program, they court monitors them while they're in this treatment center or place of living, and they have to attend outpatient appointments. We make sure they get to those appointments, that they're receiving their medications monthly. And on average, we'll say the case stays open about a year. And within that year, there's ups and downs. We're hoping for medication compliance and negative drug screens, but that's not an ultimate result of how somebody's recovery is doing, as I previously stated. And the peer support is just there in the tough times and there in the good times. We're here to be your cheerleader when you're doing great. And when it's time to step up, I might be taking you to a meeting or taking you to the probation office. But I want to pass it to Judge Leifman for a little bit, so maybe he can talk about some things I missed, or you could fill me in.
And it was great, Justin, because I think people get a better sense of the reality of this. It's not robotic, it's lives, and it really takes this one-on-one relationship to help people get better. About half of our peers are graduates of the program. I am very fortunate to work in a court system in Miami-Dade that has allowed us to do this. Most of our peers have criminal records. It's just not an issue for us. And it's worked out great. Justin, until he just got this new job, was with us for almost 14 years. I mean, he and the other peers are as stable in terms of their employment, if not more, than many of the other employees we've had in the program. And
you're saying I'm more stable than you are, Judge Leifman? Is that way?
It could be these days.
You're stable genius. Oh,
Careful. Anyway, it's an amazing team effort, and not one of us does it alone, and we all cooperate. But something Justin touched upon that I think is really important that I want to point out. We are a pre-adjudicatory program for the most part, which means that you do not have to take a plea to get our services. I don't believe in that. I don't think you should have to plead guilty to a crime to get access to treatment. And unfortunately, many programs around the country do that. And people can leave our program anytime they want and go to trial. It's just not an issue. In our 20 years, I don't know if it's ever happened, but it's easier to tell someone that they have that option than to take that option away from them and then them wanting to have it back. And so I think it helps us build some trust with the population that we're trying to serve right off the bat. We're not trying to, put them in a corner or force them to do something they may not be ready to do. And I think it's made it a lot easier for us to be as successful as we have been. We do have programs within it, and this is probably, will go a little bit closer to Dr. Schwartz's heart. We have an assisted outpatient. In fact, we have the only assisted outpatient treatment program in a criminal court in the United States. And so a few years ago, we were able to get the legislature to expand the jurisdiction of AOT, assisted outpatient treatment. And it allows a county court criminal judge to apply a civil law in criminal court. And it's fascinating. And it's a narrow law in Florida, which I believe it should be, but it's for a narrow population that usually has been homeless. when you go to criminal court, particularly in the misdemeanor division, you see a lot of very sick homeless people just cycling in and out. And this law that we use is really targeted for them. As I said, they often lack insight to their illness. They've been arrested, I didn't talk about the 97 people. So I should talk about it. I did another presentation an hour ago. I'm like, did I talk about that yet? But no. At the Florida Mental Health Institute, the University of South Florida, they're one of the few institutions that have had the ability to tell a community who the highest utilizers of criminal justice and mental health services are. And so when we were really, starting to pick up steam in our program, we wanted to do a better job identifying the highest utilizers and focus what, limited resources we had on that population. So we sent the names of 3,300 people who had come through our program with their social security numbers, because HIPAA doesn't apply to us. And they have access to all of the arrests in Florida, all the civil commitments, and all the Medicaid and Medicare data. And they literally can tell you who the highest utilizers of criminal justice and mental health services are. So I thought, hey, man, if they can narrow it to 1,000 people, that's still a good start. We can try to wrap our arms around 1,000 people. Well, I get this letter in the mail, and I open it up, and there was one piece of paper. And on this one piece of paper were the names of 97 people, primarily men, primarily diagnosed with some type of schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, primarily homeless and primarily co-occurring. So over 5 years, these 97 people had been arrested 2,200 times. They spent 27,000 days in the Dade County Jail, 13,000 days at a state-funded psychiatric program, cost taxpayers about $17 million in today's dollars, and we got absolutely nothing for it. And so the AOT program in criminal court is focused on that population because we just haven't been able to help them very well. And they just keep coming back. Some of them have been psychotic for decades because of their homelessness and lack of access to treatment. And it's very difficult to get them to either volunteer or to go into and stay into our programs. And so it's been enormously successful. However, most of them have burned a lot of bridges, and getting them housing is really difficult. And which is going to get me to talk about our new facility in a minute. But just to give you an idea, in the month of March of last year, we had 16 people that qualified for the AOT criminal program. And we were able to find data on 15 of them. These 15 people over their lifetime had been arrested 331 times. They had spent over 9,100 days in jail. They had cost taxpayers just on their criminal justice costs about $2.4 million. And they had spent another 2,000 days in some type of psychiatric unit. And they're just either not getting access or they're not willing to stay in the existing system. And when we do get them in our program, and most of them join voluntarily once they see that, they're going to qualify. We bring them an entire array of services, and in most cases, they put them on a long-term injectable. And within 2 weeks, they come back to court and it's like a different person. They have insight, they want to start to get better. It's really a remarkable transformation. But one of the problems we're having is capacity. And as a result, we've been very successful with 70 to 80% of our population. But for the 20 to 30% that we have not, it's because of their acuity. They just have an extraordinarily high acuity of mental illness. They have gone untreated for decades, many of them. There may be some permanent deficits as a result of their untreated psychosis. And we haven't been able to help them. And so as a result of the success of this program, and as I mentioned, closing down a jail and saving the county a lot of money, the county gave us $43 million, and Jackson Memorial gave us another $8 million. And we are just about done building the first of its kind mental health diversion facility. And what makes this facility so unique is that we're going to eliminate the fragmentation, and we're going to put all of the essential elements of recovery in one location. Look, we know it works. This isn't a treatment problem. It's a system problem. And it's a problem of getting people, access to treatment, but equally important, access to quality, competent treatment. And it just doesn't exist very well. And so the idea is to put all of these resources in one location. And so this building, fortuitously or ironically, depending on how you look at it, is the old Competency Restoration facility. This is going to be a much better use of it. It's 181,000 square feet. It's 7 stories tall. It's huge. It'll have a receiving facility both for addiction and for serious mental illness. But you only get into this building one of 2 ways. One is you have to be a high utilizer. You have to be someone that meets that kind of criteria of those 97 I discussed, or these 15. And you can be there voluntary or involuntary. And if you come in involuntary, you'll be taken to the crisis stabilization unit. There's a short-term residential facility. There's a day activity program that will be run by people with mental illnesses to teach self-sufficiency. In fact, Justin teaches a lot of classes. He was teaching one today. Teaching people how to manage their illness, just like we do for people with diabetes. And he's extraordinarily successful at getting people to learn how to cope and deal with their illness. It's not something that's intuitive if you don't know how to deal with the illness. It will have a day activity. It will have a culinary supportive employment program where we're converting this 5,000 square foot kitchen into a culinary supportive program so that we can help people get employment when they leave us. It's going to be a medical home. So the building is going to have primary health clinic, a dental clinic, an eye clinic, a podiatry clinic. And it's one of the reasons that Jackson donated $8 million to the project, because just keeping this population out of their primary and psych ER is going to save them about $14 million a year. It also will have a courtroom, and so that we can manage both civil and criminal cases right on site. And what really makes it special, 2 other things. One, it has a living room model. So if you're a voluntary individual that's high utilizer and you just want to hang out, you can do that. We'll provide you with food, with a cot to lay down. There'll be a peer there to help engage them. And the idea is to use that as an engagement area to help people get back into recovery or into recovery. But the other really unique piece of it is it has 200 beds of housing. And so the idea is, instead of just kicking people to the curb once we've adjudicated their case with these serious illnesses, we could gently reintegrate people back into the community with all the supports that they need to maintain recovery: housing, transportation, peer, case management. We're also teaming up with a psychiatrist, Tom Sapatico from Vermont, to use predictive analytics in a new case management system that he has developed to help do a better job managing this population. And fortuitously, again, all these federal ARP dollars, our county has generously committed $10 million of ARP dollars to the opening and operations of the facility. The city of Miami has just committed about $2 million for the same reason. And we're working with our state and federal partners to get additional dollars to help maintain this long run. We were very fortunate. The Boston Consulting Group gave us about $500,000 in pro bono work and has put together our business plan. So we have a pretty good idea how this should be operated. And within 2-3 years, they show that it'll pay for itself. And so, I mean, we're spending money now, 636 grand a day. A fraction of that will keep this facility operating and give people real opportunity instead of just letting them be warehoused in jail. And so that's kind of the next, jewel in our crown that will, what we believe will help us have a full continuity or continuum of care to truly serve this population. But from some of the mechanics, if people are interested, I know we have about 15 minutes left. It is really interesting. I mean, people come in. We have what we call a jail Inreach program. It's a co-located project at the jail with our staff. And so if people kind of get through the screening and get by us, there's another layer for us to locate people that meet criteria. And then they're referred into the program. You could be referred by anybody. And I say this tongue in cheek, but it is the God's honest truth. The hot dog stand lady outside of our courthouse referred somebody to us once that we were able to help. And so many people know about it. The state attorneys refer, the bond hearing judges.
And the police in the building.
Police in the
bring people-
building, right.
Bring people right to our office. They just
Right.
assume that anybody with a mental illness in the courthouse belongs to our program.
That's right. And so, and then, a lot of, and one of the things that Justin was able to do for us, we have a wonderful county commissioner, Sally Heyman, who is kind of our godmother. And unfortunately, she retires at the end of this year, but she meets with us regularly. And she came to meet with us one day and she's like, what do you all need? What's working? What's not working? And poor Justin, I think, had just gotten off riding a bus around all day in the middle of summer and was not in a good mood and said, we need a car. And so she got us a car. And we're a big county, they have fleets of cars. And so as a result of Justin asking, we got this great car, and we meet people in the courtroom with food, with something to drink, with their medication, with clothes. And we have transportation ready for them. And one of our peers is assigned to drive and takes them to where they're going to be sleeping that night. I mean, it's not complicated to have a warm handoff. Most systems don't do it. And yeah.
I'm sorry, just going back a second, I wanted to ask you a question. Because you mentioned capacity. And one of the issues that our state and many states struggle with is the silting up of state hospital beds with people who are referred for incapacity to proceed. What's your approach to that and your thoughts of that? Because it's sort of a new revolving door.
It is a huge revolving door. And what it's doing, it's shutting out civil beds for people that probably need it. And because this is one of the great ironies of our criminal justice system. If you're incompetent to stand trial, you have a full-blown constitutional right to treatment, right? We cannot try you unless you are competent to stand trial. So you have an entitlement to services. If you don't commit an offense and you have a serious mental illness, you have no such entitlement. And so the civil beds get squeezed out in favor of the criminal beds. We call them forensic beds. But most of those forensic commitments, in my opinion, are unnecessary. One of the programs we have, which I've not touched upon, is a competency restoration alternative diversion program. And so in Miami-Dade, if you get arrested on a felony and you are incompetent to stand trial, and
Tell them what incompetent means, Judge, because it might not mean what some people think it means.
Right. I mean, it's a legal definition that you're incapable of assisting in your own defense and you don't understand the nature and consequences of the charges against you. And so if you meet that criteria and you're not willing to voluntarily be restored in the community, you generally go to a competency restoration facility, which is what you're talking about, Marvin, in terms of, squeezing out a bed. And so they go there, it's kind of a joke, and they're given medication and they're sort of taught what a crime is and what a lawyer and a judge is. And in most cases, we did a study in Florida, 70% of people that are restored have three things happen to them in Florida. They have the charges dropped, they get credit for time served, or they get probation, and they walk out of the courthouse without any access to treatment. And Florida spends about 25% of its entire adult mental health budget on restoring about 4,000, 5,000 people a year. And we have about 170,000 people a year in Florida who at the time of their arrest need mental health treatment. It's nuts, right? So what we did, and there's a lot of legal pressure because in Florida, which is a good thing, we have a law that says once you're adjudicated incompetent to stand trial, the state only has 15 days to take you from jail and send you to a restoration facility. Most states don't have that, and people have been sitting indefinitely waiting for a bed to open up. Well, there's a major federal case out of the state of Washington, True Blood v. Washington, that says it's unconstitutional to do that, that there has to be dates, usually, I mean, short, and we're talking 7 to 14 days. Otherwise, it's unconstitutional, and it's put enormous pressure on the, in fact, the folks that Justin's working for now are the mental health directors, and a lot of them have been sued criminally, not just civilly. It happened in Florida, and held in criminal contempt over this issue because they're violating the Constitution. So what we do in Miami is very different. We take people who are on a nonviolent offense, who are charged with a felony, who otherwise would have gone to a competency restoration, and we keep them in a local program at Jackson Memorial Hospital. And instead of focusing on restoring them, we focus on reintegrating them back to the community, because that's where they're going anyway. What a novel idea. And then once they're stable, we then put them in our felony diversion program, where the court then monitors them for another year and helps them maintain their stability. And they get all the services Justin talked about: housing, transportation, peers, and it's great. It's about a third cheaper than competency restoration. They're out about a third to 50% faster. The outcomes are about 100% better. And the state is saving a ton of money. We're 4 times the size of Broward County. We have half the number of competency restorations as they do now. And it's because of this alternative competency restoration program. We call it MDFAC, which stands for Miami-Dade Forensic Alternative Center. And it's amazing. And it's one of the things that we do to really help keep costs down, but more importantly, get better outcomes. And so I don't know if I did it, but when we get off, Marvin, I'll send you, we just had this beautiful new description done of all of our programs, and I'll send it to you. And if anybody is interested, it describes every program I'm talking about, and it's got all kinds of data that shows outcomes. And it's really impressive. And the National Center of State Courts helped us do it, so thank you to them. And it's really exciting. And I will tell you, one of the most exciting things going on right now is the Conference of Chief Justices, which is the conference of all the state Supreme Court Chief Justices and the conference of all the state court administrators. For only the 3rd time in their history, have created a task force, and this one's on mental health. And basically what they're trying to do is to help scale the kind of work that we've done here in Miami and other places around the country to really make this the national model. You don't need a lot of new law. What we did is really through a collaborative agreement. I had everybody come to my chambers and sign a document telling me that they were going to make a structural change. And that's how we started. And judges have the ability to do that. And so we're trying to figure out how we do that on this national scale. And it's really coming along incredibly well. And I'm really excited. They put a lot of time and resources in it. And I think in 10 years, we're going to look back and it'll be the exception of not doing it in 10 years. It won't be the other way around. So, there's a lot of reason to be hopeful in this terrible period of COVID, which seems like we live in Groundhog Day and it won't ever end. But eventually it will, and hopefully we'll come out of it on the other side, at least when it comes to mental health, stronger and smarter and more humane, and spend our taxpayer dollars more effectively and improve our public safety, and really give people an opportunity for a life and stop this criminalization, which we've done all too well.
Great. When you send us that information, Judge, we'll put it on the events page next to the recording that we're doing of this. That would be great. I think people would love to read more about this.
Great.
Well, we have a few more minutes. If there are questions that people have, they can put them in the chat. But are there any other comments you'd like to make?
Well, I looked at the questions real quick, so maybe I can answer a couple that I saw. The criteria of the program, you have to have a serious mental illness. Pretty much anybody gets accepted in misdemeanors, so we take any charge in misdemeanors. The big four that we deal with are schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depression, and PTSD. What we tried to do now, because we do 3 assessments, if you come out as a low risk, low need individual, we may not take you in the program. And we may just send you back home and drop your charge, because the data shows us that you're going to be fine without us, and that putting you through some rigorous program is going to actually increase your chances of getting arrested. And so we've gotten a lot smarter about it by using these assessment tools. The other thing that came out, and we haven't talked about it, law enforcement. My CIT coordinator, who's amazing, gets about 150 calls a month from police officers she has trained for their own personal mental health issues. So one of the things that we did is we set up a treatment program outside their police departments for them. And it has made them incredibly empathetic. It has changed the culture significantly. And our police shootings have almost stopped. And you know, I think a lot of the shootings, race certainly can play a role, but I think PTSD also plays a major role. And I think by addressing that, we've been able to get much better police outcomes, and everybody wins by doing this program.
Thank you.
Justin, did you want to add anything?
I just wanted to open it up if anybody had a question.
Some questions in the chat.
Yeah, but
Yeah, there was one question about the age limits and or your approach to juveniles, or
yeah, I
we
responded to a couple people
okay.
privately in the chat just to let them know, but it's adults 18 or older, but there are peer support and juvenile justice systems in the country that, even though we don't deal directly with them, there are supports for them. And I see a question from Tyler. It's long. What do you think?
Well, while you're reading it, you know, trauma is a big issue. 92% of the women in jails and prisons in the US have these horrific histories with mental illnesses, have these horrific histories of trauma, mostly sexual abuse. And about 75% of men who are in the criminal justice system with serious mental illnesses also have horrible histories of trauma, often domestic violence, witnesses to violent crimes, or sometimes sexual abuse. And so we try very, very hard to identify that and help people get trauma services for their PTSD while they're in. In fact, this morning I watched a fascinating webinar by the NIH on the use of psychedelics as a potential treatment. It was really fascinating. And there may be some potential eventually, after they do a lot more studying, as real treatments for these things.
I want to try to take a stab at Tyler's question, because I like to hear questions. That's why I asked that. I hate reading things because I get them out of context, but somebody with not a serious issue, I don't think anybody should be in the criminal justice system personally. It doesn't get people better. I see you agreed with that, but there needs to be a system of care and beyond this, that it's easier enough to get treatment for mental health, that we're aware enough as a culture to walk into a Walgreens as it is to buy a 6-pack and a pack of cigarettes. That's the type of culture we should push to be on, where we're all on the same page and things are not shunned or put in the closet, and we could get help, whether it's PTSD, anxiety, or trauma. And we've all experienced some sort of trauma. And if you've made it through the last 2 years, you have some sort of trauma or secondary trauma just from that.
You know,
I've run out of time. I don't know what.
I think that one of the other things that we all need to start thinking about doing is supplementing a law enforcement response to a call in crisis. Only about 7% of mental health calls actually need a law enforcement officer involved, because there's usually a weapon or violence. The other 93% generally don't. And I think it would be tremendously helpful if we had better and different systems in place, so that if a crisis call went out, we could have a different response. Or I actually think one of the things we've learned so well from COVID is Zoom. I'd like to see people get access immediately to a counselor or a treatment provider online. Why do we even need someone to go to their house if it can be dealt with right online? And so I think we need to be thinking differently. There's a big push in July. The 988 system is supposed to come online. It's nowhere near ready. I think everyone has different expectations about what it's going to be. And I think we need to keep in mind, it took almost 50 years to get 911 up and running well. And they had resources. And so talk about lack of capacity, you'll call and then there won't be anywhere for you to go. And
Right.
so I think we really need to rethink the rollout a little bit. I think we need to think what it's going to look like in 20 years as opposed to what it'll look like today. And
We're working on it, Judge. I'm
I
gonna
know.
follow up with you. I got something on the back burner for you.
Good.
I want to.
Well, let me, I'm sorry.
Good. Good.
I know we could go on for a long time. I wish we did have the time because we're talking, we've touched on so many different issues at this interface. But I think we're going to have to let people go. I really want to thank you, and we'll look forward to the information. We'll post it on the center webpage. But I really want to thank both of you for this presentation, but more importantly, for the work you do. And so thank you, Judge Leifman, and thank you, Justin. And I can see why the judge is going to miss you when you go to Nashville, but I'm sure we'll see you in that capacity as well. So thanks everybody who participated. This has just been a terrific presentation and discussion, and we're proud to have you, Judge, as a board member to continue our work.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.